Hello everyone. In this episode, I'm going to be taking a, hopefully, more informative look at what spatial justice means. In the previous video, spatial justice seemed to represent a fantasy world where pollution, traffic, and economic disparity could all be solved by localizing the production of food and energy. And if you have not seen the previous video, then yeah, I think that summary covers all of what was pitched of the idea. But today we're going to look at something that is hopefully more informative than an explanatory cartoon. Julian Ageman is the professor of human and environmental policy and planning at Tufts University. He has also authored books like Sharing Cities, A Case for Truly Smart and Sustainable Cities, and Sustainable Communities and the Challenge of Environmental Justice. Well, great! A full-on professor. We are sure to get a clear explanation of what spatial justice is. Let's take a look.
And the final consideration I want to give you is this concept of spatial justice. And interestingly, British Member of Parliament David Lammy said, just as social justice requires that life chances are not distributed along class lines, spatial justice requires they are not distributed geographically.
Okay, so spatial justice requires that life chances are not distributed geographically. But if you're in the desert versus a tropical island, your life chances are always going to be inherently less advantageous. And short of somehow terraforming the entire planet to be exactly the same wherever you go, there will always be a variance of the quality and condition of your life chances depending on where you are. Oh, man, there's that imagination of mine running wild again. We're not even a minute into this. Okay, there has to be a clearer explanation than that. Let's continue.
How many of you grew up in towns where one side of the railway tracks, things were very different from the other side of the railway tracks? Or cities where, cities where the north side or the south side or the east side or the west side, that literally one side of a road, one side of a wall was different. Now, I'm showing you here through the slides, some cities around the world are actually divided cities. Some cities are totally divided by a wall, but others are divided not by a wall, but by some sort of feature, like a railway line, a zone boundary or something like that.
Or a river, or a lake, or a canyon, or a mountain range, or a coastline. And in trying to compensate for these natural divisions of space, we humans may indeed construct things to make use of or overcome these barriers, which may themselves then act as artificial lines of community division commensurate to the natural lines of community division. I think I get where you're coming from.
So, spatial justice is, I think, something that you need to take seriously when you're planning and doing your work in sustainability and social justice. And one of the most powerful tools for looking at spatial justice is, of course, GIS. GIS has given us the power to see how social mobility, social opportunity happens in spatial contexts.
GIS. Well, I'm assuming he means a geographic information system, a system that is designed to capture, store, manipulate, analyze, manage, and present spatial or geographic data. Yes, that probably would be a good tool to employ on this subject.
And I want to give you two examples of spatial justice in terms of urban spaces.
Finally, some examples. Examples in urban spaces. Urban. So, I guess you could say these would be concrete examples? Huh? Huh? My mom thinks I'm funny.
And the first is urban parks, and we're in a wonderful park here. But as Lowe, Taplin and Schultz said, that in this new century we're facing a different kind of threat to public space, not one of disuse, but of patterns of design and management that exclude some people, thereby reducing social and cultural diversity.
Wait a second. Let's take a look at all of that. In this new century, we are facing a different kind of threat to public space, not one of disuse, but of patterns of design and management that exclude some people and reduce social and cultural diversity. Well, I look forward to hearing proof that these exclusions and reductions, if true, are the result of intelligent design and not evolution. Contact theory posits that interracial interactions that occur in leisure settings have the potential to be more genuine and sincere compared with the more obligatory interactions that take place in formal settings. Contact theory? I'm still trying to get a handle on spatial justice. But, okay, interracial interactions. What does race have to do with it? Can't this idea hold true for human interactions in general? But, moving on. In the 1980s, environmentalists in Bristol, UK, persuaded the local parks department to create wildflower meadows. These are environmentally sound, but are they socially just? Wildflower meadows become a question of justice? I mean, if you have pollen allergies, then I suppose you would be less inclined to go to those parks, but does that factor then become an injustice done to such persons? I must be missing something.
So, their point is that the way we design public space and the way we manage public space can affect who is in that space.
Well, I suppose if it is a public space, then anyone can go to it. Now, how convenient it might be to go to it is going to vary depending on where you live in relation to where the public space is, but okay, I have to be overthinking this.
Two examples, both of them from the United Kingdom. The picture of the park there is very much like a park that I was asked 20 years ago to look at by Hertfordshire County Council, which, for those of you who know, it's in the Green Belt just north of London. And the County Council was asking me to look at this park in terms of equity.
Looking at a park in terms of equity. Equity just being another term for justice. So, looking at a park in terms of justice. Not criminal justice, obviously, but social justice. I cannot wait to see how this works.
They were saying, is there something we can do in this park, given that the people that are in this park are very different from those 150 years ago when the park was designed?
Well, I can imagine that if your park hasn't had any update to its landscaping or facilities in 150 years, then sure, a redesign might make sense. But it's a park. Clear, open, and green space in which people can relax. Doesn't matter whether you're a person from today or 150 years ago. A park is a park, isn't it?
And the first thing I noticed walking around was that most parks were designed around, and most parks still are, whether it's urban parks or whether it's, well, not so much urban parks, but certainly what's called a country park, which is the one I was looking at, or national parks, are designed around the sort of transcendentalist ideal of wandering. You know, two people and a dog, or, you know, a kid, a family.
Well, a national park is a bit different from a city park or even a country park, but sure, it's open space for people to relax. This may include wandering around, depending on the park in question. Though, the park doesn't care if you're wandering as a couple with a dog, or alone with a dog, or just sitting under a tree. It's a park.
But what I saw was extended family groups, large social groups of Asian, African, Turkish, Greek, Cypriot people. Parks were not designed, European and North American parks were not designed around this.
Wait, parks were not designed around what? Accommodating large groups? Or accommodating specific races and cultures? It's a park. It's open space. Neutral space. What are you talking about?
Witness the seating arrangements. Most seats were for 2 to 4 people. There weren't seats in a forum for large groups of people. Where do people sit?
Okay, so build more park benches if the number of visiting large groups is increasing. Or maybe even build some small pavilions that can be reserved ahead of time by groups of people. It's not a difficult problem to solve, but neither is it a question of justice, only logistics. But what does any of that have to do with the race or culture of the people coming to the park?
And I reported this to the Parks Authority, that, you know, that this park was designed around this notion, this transcendental ideal of wandering lonely and solitude. Whereas a lot of cultural and ethnic groups these days, they don't see nature and parks as being places of solitude and reflection. These are social spaces, places to have parties and have fun. That's a big difference culturally.
An open, clear, neutral space encourages isolation and loneliness. Before our speaker came along, the park in question could not be used for social activities. Social activities are only the province of cultural and ethnic groups these days. Anyone who is not cultural or ethnic is a wandering isolationist in a park setting. Got it.
And so a design issue then is, how do you design for large groups of people to be able to sit and converse? I don't see much in the way of evidence of that.
Benches, pavilions, campgrounds. It's very simple.
The second issue was a management issue. Now, you'll notice most of this grass out here is what's called ryegrass. It's a very hard wearing, it's used for sports, it's used for people to sit on, it's just a general grass around the world that is used in recreational settings. In one city in the southwest of Britain, Bristol, the local wildlife trust asked the park to embark on an experiment. The experiment was, let's create a wildflower meadow.
Excellent. I had hoped the whole wildflower situation would be given some more context. Okay, tell us how wildflowers became a question of spatial justice. I'm all ears.
Let's make that section of park a wildflower meadow. And so over about 2 years, they employed a management regimen to make the grass sward grow up, and all these wildflowers, native wildflowers, came in, and, you know, all the bugs, and it was a sort of, you know, a naturalist's dream. Everybody loved it.
Uh-huh. Everyone except...
And then somebody noticed, where are the Asian and African Caribbean people that used to come in this park? Why aren't they coming in this park anymore? Clue, long grass, snakes. There's a residual fear of snakes amongst people certainly from the Caribbean, from Africa, and from India.
Snakes. Long grass can indicate the presence of snakes.
A snake, a snake, snake, a snake. Oh, it's a snake.
So, the presence of wildflowers drove away people from Africa, India, and the Caribbean because there are no snakes in tall grass anywhere else in the world. Got it.
So an ecological management regimen was having a negative cultural effect, a negative effect on the cultural diversity of the park. Now, I'm not saying that it was wrong to do this. We have to have ecologically sensitive areas. But what if one of the wildlife trust had been a member of a minority group? Or what if one of the park staff had said, hang on, are we going to create long grass here? That's going to be a no-no with certain cultural groups, just as dogs in parks are not very popular with Muslims, etc.
Muslims don't like dogs in parks? Well, that's a new one for me, but that aside, I wonder if our speaker has ever heard the phrase, "You cannot please all of the people all of the time." If any decision you might make in a park design may or may not be 100% acceptable to someone, well then, I guess the safest course would be to just get rid of parks altogether. Either that, or you just make sure you have such bland, uninteresting landscapes of space that no one can possibly be offended by any of it. Until they come up with a reason to be offended, of course. Yeah, spatial justice really is starting to sound a lot like social justice.
My point is, there may not be answers for some of these questions, but we need to start asking the questions.
Yeah, okay. Right. Those concerns I've outlined might be utter nonsense, but we still need to be concerned, because the people whose feelings get hurt by wildflowers can feel better knowing that someone is thinking about their feelings. I guess?
If a wildflower meadow was the solution, what was the question that was asked? And we need to start asking some questions about our society. We know very well about the different recreational habits of different cultural groups.
So, segregation. I mean, that is ultimately what you're going to have to implement in these parks, isn't it? An area that is agreeable for Muslims, an area that is agreeable to Africans, an area that is agreeable for Asians. You can't please all the people all of the time, but you can establish zones of likely comfort for them, right? And how would you divide these zones from one another? With paths? Or hedges? Or walls?
And so we need to start thinking about what I call culturally inclusive spaces. How do we create spaces that reflect the cultures now and into the future in cities? How do we do that?
Why? Why do you need to do that? Why can't you just have an open, free, and neutral space for people to enjoy that represents a shared community, rather than highlight differences and points of separation? How is social division an aspect of spatial justice?
Because the theory behind this is that point in the middle paragraph there, contact theory. The theory is the more contact we have with difference, with different groups, the more we will become tolerant and understanding of those groups.
So you think that by designing park space with certain people and cultures in mind over others, you think that playing favorites to some sensitivities over others, you think that this all will increase contact between different people. It won't cause some people to be more or less inclined to make use of such space that wasn't designed specifically for them. Got it.
And that goes back to Allport's contact theory from 1954, but more recent research published in the National Academy of Sciences has shown that people who live in diverse areas are more tolerant, and that's not. And they actually controlled for those people who moved to diverse areas because that's where they wanted to live. They found that basically those people who were brought into contact with difference and diversity were more tolerant.
Right. So why not design parks on the basis of shared human desires for space, relaxation, and beauty, rather than worrying about cultural or ethnic sensitivities? Wouldn't such parks bring a diversity of people to them based on those factors alone?
And if we want to move towards those intercultural cities that I mentioned, and if we want this bigger sort of civic democracy, then we're going to have to think about creating spaces of encounter. How do we create spaces where people encounter each other, different groups meet?
Make a big, nice park. Provide spaces to play, to relax, to sit, and to eat. Make it pretty and accessible. Don't delineate spaces along ethnic or cultural lines or values, and accept that you cannot make everyone happy. How hard is that, really?
We can't go along just having different groups, different cultural groups in isolation. How do we bring them together?
You are the one bringing up divisions. Race, ethnicity, culture, religion. You are the one worrying about whether there should be dogs in the park on the chance that Muslims might not like it, or that all Indians and Africans have a fear of tall grass. You are the one advocating for designing parks with divisions in mind. You cannot be serious.
And it may be that we can think of ways of designing. Now, again, I'm not saying I have the answers here.
If you don't have the answers, then why should anyone consult you on how to design a park?
But what we have to have is an urban design and a parks design profession that looks more like Phoenix today, or looks more like Boston today.
So Phoenix and Boston already have the answers? So then why don't you have the answers based on their example? I am very confused.
That's my point about cultural competency and being more representative of the communities which you're serving.
Professor Agyeman is, by all rights, an expert on the subject of spatial justice. Yet, given about 10 minutes of uninterrupted time at a podium, the most I came to understand about spatial justice, using the park examples as representative of the concept, is that sometimes not everyone is happy with their surroundings. And that's it. Sometimes the environment one finds themselves in is not 100% accommodating to one's needs or desires. And so, spatial justice is meant to address such problems, though there are no real answers on how to do so. But you see, what is important is that you keep asking the questions, because that shows you care. And caring about other people's feelings, well, that's what spatial, that's what spatial justice is all about. I guess. As always, thank you for watching.